LA Kings president Luc Robitaille talks about the team and more during Lunch with Luc. Details on that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Coming up on today's show, I'm going to give you my Kings quarter century team, a little bit late to the party, but I still think it's worth sharing. And we'll preview Friday night's Kings Stars game. But we start with Lunch with Luc. Luc would be, of course, Hockey Hall of Famer, Kings legend, and current Kings president, Luc Robitaille. And now this was not a one-on-one lunch with me and Luc. I wish. But I was part of a group of season ticket holders and their guests to have lunch with Luc Robitaille on Thursday. And we got to ask him questions about the team and anything else we wanted to. This was all thanks to Kings season ticket holder and fan of the show, Brian in Mission Viejo. He emailed me and asked me if I would like to be his guest. I said, absolutely. And I cannot thank Brian enough for his generous offer. Also, thanks to his wife, Courtney, who couldn't go. And so I got to go instead. I think Courtney told him that I think Eddie would have more fun than I would anyway. But not sure how often the Kings do these types of things. But it was a group of about 40 season ticket holders and their guests at the Toyota Sports Performance Center there in El Segundo. And if you've never been there, it's where the Kings practice. And the Kings were practicing when we got there. They were going through some drills. It was, look, I see certain people in the organization up in the press box, but it was still surreal a little bit to see GM Rob Blake just standing there watching the drills right there next to everybody. And he was having a chat with friend of the show, Daryl Evans, Kings broadcaster and former Kings player, and met up with Brian. And the group was led through the LA Kings offices. And I have to say the setup there is very impressive. And if you're a Kings fan, it was very, very cool, from the wall of Kings bobbleheads to just seeing all the people in the organization in every different facet, you know, in their cubicles, in their offices with all the Kings stuff everywhere. Really was a first class setup. And I got to say, I was pretty impressed. We were taken into a conference room. We all took a seat waiting for Luc to arrive, and he did a short time later. And I know there is a segment of the fan base that is always calling for everyone to be fired, from Rob Blake to Luc Robitaille. But I will say it is almost impossible not to like Luc Robitaille. He is incredibly friendly, funny, charming. And honestly, I could have listened to him all day, talk about the team, talk about hockey, and just was really enjoyable. He ended up taking us, or talking to us, I should say, for about 2 hours. And I thought, I was not there as a member of the media. I was there as a fan. But I've been a part of a lot of, listening to general managers, front office people talk. And a lot of times they'll give you the party line, or they'll just give you lip service on a lot of things. I thought Luc was really candid. And I wanted to share some of the things that I thought that were very interesting that he shared with us, with you. So I guess I'll start with the question that I asked him, which was about the Kings at some point landing a big-time elite star, because we've seen the Dodgers get Shohei Ohtani, the Lakers get Luka Doncic. He said he was very well aware of what the other teams in town have done. And he said that the Kings will always be looking to sign elite free agents or make big-time trades. He said that Mr. A, which is the team owner, Philip Anschutz, basically listens to whatever the Kings tell him that they need to have. And he indicated that if they ever went to him and said, we need X amount of money to sign this guy, and it's going to be big for the team, that he said that he's willing to do that. He said that, they've never been told by Philip Anschutz that they can't sign a certain player or can't go after a certain player because they don't want to spend the money on that player. He did go into, obviously there are cap issues and you can't just, it complicates things, and there's that side of it. He was asked by one of the guests there, with the salary cap going up in the next few years, making a significant increase, $113 million it's supposed to be in the next 3 years. He was asked, are the Kings going to spend to the cap when it's $113 million? And his response was, quote, "We have to," end quote. So I took that as a positive, that the Kings will be spending to the cap as the cap goes up. Luc Robitaille was asked about the Kings making moves this year at the deadline, of course, and he went into how the salary cap works and talked about why the Kings, will be looking to make moves, or did make moves, like sending Samuel Hellenius to the AHL and then calling him back up and sending him back down. And it wasn't only about maybe getting him a game in the AHL, but it's also about how they accrue cap space throughout the season by making those kinds of moves. And he said the Kings should have around $5 million come the trade deadline time to be able to try and sign a player. I thought it was interesting that he did say that he might be interested in trying to sign another physical forward, because he was asked about the Kings being uncomfortable to play against, and he kind of indicated he would like them to be even more uncomfortable to play against. He talked about how 30, 40 goal scorers just aren't available, but you can get a 20 goal scorer. But he said that they have to fit what the Kings are looking for. They're not just going to bring in someone to bring someone in. They have to, upgrade what the Kings already have. He went into a lot of detail on the analytics side of things and talked about the vast amounts of data and information that the Kings use to evaluate pretty much everything when it comes to players. I think he said that it was something called The Crown, is the program they use. And he just talked about all the information they have on all the players in the organization and the players in the league, and how they use how technology has impacted the way they look at players and evaluate players. He was asked about certain Kings players on the team this year. He said that Alex Laferriere was the biggest surprise to him on the team. He was asked about the power play, and he mentioned that Kevin Fiala playing the entire 2 minutes of the power play hasn't necessarily resulted in the power play being better, but he said that he thought those extra minutes for Kevin have helped him to kind of get back on track, which I thought was an interesting comment. He said that he believes Philip Deneau and Trevor Moore are starting to find their games, and he said that Trevor Moore, he feels, is getting close. He talked about being patient with Drew Doughty. Had a funny story that he said that he tells Drew he needs to play more like the Kings are trailing when at the beginning of a game, because I guess the translation is that Drew shoots more when the Kings are down a goal, and he wants him to shoot more when it's 0-0 or at the start of the game. He went into talking about the 11-7 setup and some of the benefits of that. And he seemed to indicate that when Mikey Anderson returns, that the Kings will be going back to the 11-7. Now that's a coaching decision, but he kind of let that, I don't know if he let it out of the bag or not, but he seemed to kind of indicate that that's what they would be willing to do. And he also mentioned that the Kings were probably looking to keep Vladislav Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson together, and that Drew Doughty would be playing on the second pairing with Joel Edmondson. So that's interesting. We haven't seen that, certainly as far as Drew's ice time coming back so far, but he did mention that. Also talked about some of the issues with Brant Clark, talking about him needing to be more physical in his own zone and learning to pin opponents up against the boards to try and prevent cycles and, having players get free and moving the puck around. He said that Clark is sometimes indecisive defensively, but he also said that's part of being a young player. He was asked about Alex Turcotte, and he had a lot of great things to say about him. And I thought it was interesting when he was talking about Turcotte, he brought up Samuel Fagemo, the Ontario Reign All-Star, and they're one of the top goal scorers in the league. And he said that Fagemo needs to play more like Turcotte. And I think the translation there was he needs to have a grittier element to his game to be able to get a shot at playing in the NHL with the Kings this year. He talked about the frustration of players missing the net too often. He was asked why the power play wasn't good. He talked about how it is a lot better at home than on the road. And he hoped that with the Kings playing so many home games coming up, that would help get the power play going. He also said that the Kings players don't beat the opposing players one-on-one a lot with one-on-one moves. And he says, when you do that, it's more likely that you will get a hooking or a holding penalty from a player trying to stop you if you can beat him one-on-one. And he said it's been really hard for the Kings to get into any kind of rhythm on their power play because they don't get that many opportunities. He was also asked, why are the Kings so good at home? And he said, I don't know, which is funny because sometimes those things happen. Like one year, the Kings will be great on the road and just like 500 at home. And then the next year, it's like sometimes there's no rhyme or reason for that. Luke also touched on some of the more business side of things and talked about battling for dates and start times at crypto.com arena, which I thought was interesting, it's funny because Anschutz Entertainment owns crypto.com arena and they own the Kings, but they do battle for different start times. He said that the 5 p.m. start times on Saturday was his idea. And he said it was to get a competitive advantage over some of their opponents. He said that Steve Yzerman, the Detroit Red Wings GM, complained and asked, why are we playing at 5 o'clock after they had just played a 7 p.m. game the day before in Anaheim? And Luke basically told him, because they're former teammates, he said he did it because he was trying to give them 2 hours less of rest. And Yzerman apparently kind of smiled and said, okay, I understand it. You're trying to get a competitive advantage. He also talked about the uncertainty of local TV broadcasts. He says no one's making money in the NHL on their local TV broadcasts, and everyone's kind of trying to figure out where things are going with all the streaming platforms and things like that. And he said it's all very uncertain right now. He shared a ton of old stories which I won't get into, except for there were 2 things that I thought were interesting, both Kings related. He said that the NHL changed a rule because of Jarrett Stoll, that Jarrett Stoll was so good at winning faceoffs and tying up the stick and then using his hand to pass it back to defenders, that the league changed the rule where you're not allowed to do that on faceoffs anymore. You cannot touch it with your hand. I knew the rule change. I didn't know, though, that Jarrett Stoll was the reason for that rule. So the Jarrett Stoll rule was something I didn't know about. And one more thing he mentioned, he said that game 1 of the 1993 Stanley Cup Finals, he said before the start of the third period, Wayne Gretzky told all the players in the locker room, check your curve, make sure you don't have an illegal curve. And apparently everybody but one player listened, which I was like, wow, that's amazing. It was great stuff and an awesome experience. And I thought hopefully you found some of that interesting. I cannot thank Brian and Mission Viejo enough for inviting me to do that. It was awesome. Really appreciate that. So thank you, Brian. And it was a really cool thing. If you're a season ticket holder and you ever get a chance to have lunch with Luke, I highly recommend it. It's a very, very cool thing. And I did want to say one thing. We were walking out of the building and a gentleman stopped me and he said, are you the host of Locked on LA Kings? And I said, yes. And he said, he enjoyed the show and he was watching. And I said, thank you very much. And I'm so stupid. I didn't ask his name. I don't know why I didn't do that, but I apologize. Sir, if you're watching, you know who you are. I apologize for not asking you what your name was, but thank you so much for the support of the show. And again, thanks to Brian and Mission Viejo for inviting me to have a lunch with Luke. That was really, really cool. All right, up next, I'm going to chime in with my picks for the LA Kings all quarter century team. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, those of us that live in Southern California, so lucky. We live in a place where we can see so many live events, sports, concerts, theater events, comedy shows. And when you go to these live events and you want to get your tickets, you need to use Gametime. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets to live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The all-in pricing feature shows you the total up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. And you can check out the Vantage Point with a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy it. You know exactly the view you're going to get. You will get the lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, in December, the NHL announced it was going to honor its best players from the past 25 years with teams announcing their quarter century teams. Each club did a first and second quarter century team. Apparently, they were selected by media members, not me, retired players and executives specific to the clubs. Players under consideration for selection were to have appeared in a game for their respective franchises starting January 1st of 2000. So each team's best players since the year 2000, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie on the first team, 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a goalie on the second team. The aforementioned Luc Robitaille, for example, would not be on this list because he only played 3 seasons in the 2000s. And this is just taking into account the years that you played from 2000 and beyond. So the LA Kings did release their quarter century team last month. I honestly didn't focus on it because I thought that I wanted to pick my own when I had time. So I picked my quarter century team without knowing what the official selections were by the LA Kings. And I thought it would be interesting to see how mine compared to theirs. So the first team selections for the Kings quarter century team, some of these are just layups. They don't take quite any thought at all. 3 of the forwards, like I said, 2 of them immediately, Anze Kopitar and Dustin Brown. I mean, they're both top 10 in pretty much every category you can think of: points, games played, goals. So that's a no-brainer. On the defensive side, the no-brainer, Drew Doughty's on the top, the first team, without question. The goalie takes no thought. It's Jonathan Quick, the greatest goalie in franchise history, leader in games played, wins, shutouts, you name it. Also, oh, by the way, all these guys are 2-time Stanley Cup winners. So 3 of the 4 players on the first team forget about quarter century. These are 3 of the greatest Kings of all time. If it's a Kings first team, Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, and Jonathan Quick are on it every time for me, and I think everybody else. So that left 1 forward and 1 defenseman to pick for the first team after those layups. So for my third forward, I went with Jeff Carter, 580 career games in Los Angeles, 10 seasons with the Kings, almost as many as all the other seasons combined that he had with Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Columbus, which were 11 seasons. He's 14th in scoring in Kings history. From the 2000s and beyond, only Anze Kopitar and Adrian Kempe among forwards have more points than Jeff Carter. So Jeff Carter's my third forward. My other defenseman, it was a little bit of a debate, but I went with Alec Martinez, 597 games with the Kings, 6th all-time amongst defensemen. His 2 Stanley Cups and the overtime game winners, to me, gave him the edge over the guys that we're going to have playing on defense on the second team. Speaking of the second team, that one was a bit more challenging. But my 3 forwards on the quarter century team for the LA Kings, on the second team, Adrian Kempe, Alexander Frolov, and Ziggy Palffy. Kempe's played 600 games as a King, 183 goals and 372 points. Frolov, 538 games in LA, 168 goals and 381 points. And Palffy, in 311 games, had 150 goals and 340 points. Dramatically less games than Kempe and Frolov, but similar goals and points. So Ziggy Palffy was a force in his time with the LA Kings, a very dynamic little fun player to watch. As for my 2 defensemen on the second team, I'm going with Lubomir Vezhovsky and Mattias Norstrom. Lubo played 499 games with the Kings. He's 8th all-time in games played. 279 points is 5th all-time. Nordstrom was a defensive defenseman, so his numbers don't really stack up with some of the other guys, but former captain of the Kings, just a reliable, hard-nosed, great player. And I thought, even though he doesn't have the numbers, the style of play, the leadership, wearing the C, to me, he needed to be on the second team of the all quarter century team for the LA Kings. The other goalie, a little bit of a debate. I mean, Jonathan Quick is lapped the field when you look at the great goalies in Kings history, at least modern era. Of course, Reggie Vachon is in the conversation. But Felix Potvin is my second team quarter century team member for the LA Kings. Felix the Cat, 136 games for the Kings, a record of 61, 52, and 6. He was the goalie in net during the frenzy on Figueroa when the Kings upset the Detroit Red Wings in the playoffs. Not making the cut for me, Justin Williams, 427 games as a King, 103 goals, 266 points. Of course, 2 cups and the Conn Smythe Trophy are big on the resume, but I thought his overall numbers weren't close enough for that to give him the edge, kind of like it was for Alec Martinez for me. I didn't think that the Stanley Cups, as great as that is, and the Conn Smythe, to me, was greater than the careers that guys like Kempe and Frolov and Palffy had with the LA Kings. On defense, Jake Muzzin's numbers are better than Matthias Nordstrom, and Muzzin did win a cup, although he didn't play much, but he was on the team, and I just couldn't see picking him over Lubomir Wisnowski or Matthias Nordstrom. As far as another goalie that was in consideration, Jamie Storr, 103 games with the Kings, 58 and 56 record, but I just didn't think he was as impactful as a player as Felix Potvin was. So those were my picks. How did they stack up against the official LA Kings picks? Well, I'm happy to say I was very, very close to what the official Kings picks were. The first team is exactly the same as my first team. Kopitar, Brown, Carter, Doughty, Martinez, and Quick in net. So that was not a surprise. But there were a couple of differences between my second team and the Kings' second team. They also had the same goalie as me, Felix Potvin. They had Adrian Kempe and Ziggy Palffy, but they did not have Alexander Frolov. Instead, they picked Justin Williams, and I can absolutely see that. I like I said, I think Frolov had probably the better career, the better numbers, but Williams' impact on the Kings, the 2 cups, the Conn Smythe, I get that. I have no complaint whatsoever, and it even kind of makes me rethink picking Frolov over Mr. Game 7. On defense, though, they did have Matthias Nordstrom, which I was not sure that they would, but they did not have Lubomir Wisnowski. They had Jake Muzzin, and I would actually push back on that. Lubomir Wisnowski, 499 games to Muzzin's 496, so that's comparable. Wisnowski had 70 goals to Muzzin's 51. Lubo had 279 points to Muzzin's 213. And I know Muzzin, again, was on a cup team, but to me, that one is questionable. I think Lubomir Wisnowski deserves to be on that second team over Jake Muzzin. But that's why these things are fun. They are fun to debate, and my picks and your picks and that kind of stuff. So that was a fun thing to do. And so that was my look at the LA Kings quarter century first and second teams. All right, coming up next, we'll have a quick preview of the Kings Stars matchup for Friday. That's next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Super Bowl 59 is almost here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. It is a Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles. Chiefs are looking to three-peat. They're listed as still a 1.5 favorite, and the over-under is 48.5. That has not changed since it first came out. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, the Kings are back in action Friday night at home against the Dallas Stars. Second to last game before the 2-week break for the Four Nations face-off for the Kings. Stars always a tough opponent. They check in with a record of 34-18-1, 69 points. They're second in the Central Division. The Kings are 28-17-6 for 62 points, third in the Pacific Division. As you well know, the Kings have the best home ice winning percentage in the NHL with a record of 16-3-1. Dallas is a little bit similar to the Kings in that they've been much better at home this year than on the road. Stars at home, 27-1. On the road, 14-11-0. Kings are coming off that 6-3 home win over the Canadiens on Wednesday. The Stars are coming off a 2-1 loss to the Ducks in Anaheim on Tuesday. Expecting a very solid goalie matchup in this one. Darcy Kemper, I believe, is going to go for LA. Jake Muzzin for Dallas. Jake Ottinger for Dallas. Kemper 16, 6, and 6 on the season, 2.19 goals against average, a 919 save percentage. Ottinger is 26, 12, and 1, 2.31 goals against average, and a 912 save percentage. The Stars' leading point producer is Jason Robertson with 50. Dallas' leading goal scorer is Rope Hentz. He's got 22. The Kings' leader in points and goals is Adrian Kempe, 44 points and 24 goals. This is the second of 3 meetings between the two teams. Kings beat the Stars in LA 3-2 back on December 4th. LA was down 2-0, rallied to win it on a Warren Fogle goal in the third period. David Riddick was in net in that one. He got the win. Jake Ottinger did take the loss for Dallas. Face-off coming up between the Stars and Kings, set for 7:30 p.m. LA time. This is the second of 3 meetings. They will meet one more time in Dallas on February the 28th. But as for the Kings-Stars game, again, 7:30 LA time. You can watch it on the FanDuel Sports Network locally, ESPN Plus nationally, and you can listen to it on the 710 ESPN app. All right, for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Friday, we will recap the Kings-Stars game shortly after its conclusion and have our weekly Kings fan feedback show as well. Your chance to give your thoughts on what's going on with the LA Kings. The email address to get an email in is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And you can always leave your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comment section as well. Love for you to stay interactive with the show, following us on X, Twitter, and Instagram. We are at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you on Friday. And as always, go Kings, go.